Welcome to this video. In this video, we will talk about operators in Python. Operators are symbols that perform mathematical or logical operations. Python has several operators and they are categorized into three categories. We have arithmetic operators, we have comparison operators, we have logical operators. So when you're talking about arithmetic operators, we're talking about things like addition, multiplication, subtraction. So for example, if you wanted to add two numbers in Python, let's say the first number is equals to, and so we say number one maybe is equals to 30 and number two. So we have two variables here called number one and number two. And let's say number two is equals to 50. So we can perform arithmetic operation in these two numbers. We can say we want to see the results of adding them. So we can just say print the results, which is number one plus number two. And then we'll see the result, that's 80. If we wanted to subtract, we'll say number one minus, okay, let's say we want, okay, number one minus number two. So, and then we wanted to print this value, so we'll just say, because we want to see the value, we'll just use the print so that we see what's the results of that execution. So we'll say print number one minus number two, and the answer is negative 20. If we wanted to multiply, we will say print number one star number two. So that multiplies the two values. If we wanted to create an exponent, like we want to raise maybe a number into a power, we can say we can use two stars, which is, let's say for example, we wanted to raise number one to the power of 2. We'll write like that. So that means basically we are saying number 1 squared, which gives us the value of 900. And then if you wanted to divide the two numbers, we can say print number 1. So let's say number 2, because number 2 is bigger, divided by number 1. So here we are using the slash to be able to divide the two numbers. So you can see if you want to see the whole division with floating points, you use the single forward slash. And then if you wanted to see just the flow without the decimal points, you can say print number 1, use the two forward slashes with number 1. So we are dividing number 2 with number 1. So this one gives you a whole number. So it gives you the flow. So we're dividing number 1, number 2, and then number 2. So you can see it just gives us what? It rounds it to the lowest whole number. So if you wanted to get the remainder of dividing the two numbers, we can say we want to say print number 2 modulus, use the modulus operator, number 1. So this one gives us the remainder of dividing number 2 with number 1. So we get 20. If you divide 80 by 30, you get 1, the remaining value, 50 by 30, you get 1, the remaining value is 20. The other operators that are there, so these are the arithmetic operators that are there in Python. The other arithmetic operators are called the comparison operators, the one that you use to compare two variables or two values. So usually the comparison operator results into a true or false. So for example, you have number 1 and number 2 and you want to check if they are equal. So we'll say number 1 equals to number 2 and we check the value. So it gives us a false value because number 1 is not equal to number 2. We can also check if number 1 is not equal to number 2. So to check if it's equal, we use the double equal signs. To check if they are not equal, we write number 1 with an exclamation mark is equals to and followed by equal sign number 2. So this one will check if number 1 is not equal to number 2. So we're expecting a true value here, so we get true. And then we can check if number 1 is greater than number 2. Number 1 is greater than number 2. So this one, because number 1 is less than number 2, it should result to a false. And then we can also check if it's less than number 2. Number 1 is less than number 2. This will result to true because number 1 is less than number 2. And then we also have greater than or equals to or less than or equals to. So you can check if it's either greater than or equals to number 2, or you can also check if it's greater than or less than or equals to number 2. Oh, sorry, so here I forgot to write number 1. So we'll just repeat that. We say number 1 is less than or equals to number 2. So you can see that these are the logical operators that are there in Python. You can check if two numbers are equal. You can check if they are not equal. You can check if a number is greater than another number. You can check if a number is less than another number or greater than another number. The other operators that we have are the logical operators that can check two conditions. So if we can say, for example, is number 1 greater than or equal to number 2, and so we have the AND operator and the OR operator. So basically this also check two conditions, and for the AND operator, if all the two conditions are true, the results will be true. If one of the condition is false, if you're using an AND operator, then it means the results will be false. For the OR operator is that either of the two, if it's true, will result to a true, and if one of them, if all of them are false, that's the only time it will result to a false. So for example, if we wanted to check if number 1 is less than number 2, and if number 2 is greater than number 1. So one of these conditions, number 1 is actually less than number 2, and number 2 is actually greater than number 1. So if we have something like that, expecting to be true, all the conditions are true here. If we say number 1 is greater than number 2, and the other condition being number 2 is less than number 1, both of these conditions are false, so the result should be a false. If we replace this, we can just copy it. If we replace this with an OR here, because all of them are false, then it should result to a false. If we had one of them being false, for example, we had number 1 greater than number 2, which is false, or number 2 being greater than number 1, which is true, it should result to a true. So this is basically the operators that are there in Python. So we've looked at the arithmetic operators, we've looked at comparison operators, and we've looked at the logical operators, the and or. Thank you. That is it for this particular video. See you next time.